Hello everyone. Um so good to see all of you, metaphorically speaking, old and new. Okay, I'll get right into it. So, this is a we're going to start with a simple beginner guide. I've got some little notes here. A simple beginner guide to the game in general, in terms of what you should be seeking to do every day, every week. And then I'll go into some Caro specifics as well. Although I noticed that both were relatively lacking, so excuse me if you hear any chair creaks. I noticed both were a little lacking. I'll try to flash assets on screen, and of course there'll be timestamps. So without further ado, um, okay, so we'll start with, actually, this may seem a little bizarre, but I'm gonna start with the store button, because this is something I personally overlooked when I was new. Okay. Every single day, buy your Gnosis elixirs. Every single day you want to actively play, that is. Buy your mimetic crystals and buy your etheric shards. Although it's a tiny amount, it does add up. Of these items, these are your progression items. This is for leveling up characters, and this is for leveling up their skills. Buy these only when you need them, since they're not very valuable in terms of ratio. And finally, you have Steppenwolf. At first, I would buy 6 pieces of Steppenwolf a day, because you're going to want to have all of the Covenant options. After you've got enough pieces of it, you don't really need to worry about it unless you want to improve your Steppenwolf set. Which, speaking of which, this set is mostly for base damage based carries. I'll go through this set. Actually, I'll go through Covenants briefly while I'm at it. So an example of characters you might run this on includes Daffodil, Halot, original Halot, that is, sometimes. You might run it on Hello Catena Earlygame. Just any character who's got very big base damage numbers, especially if they also have poison. This is a late game Covenant set. You'll know what to do with it by the time you get here. Okay, most importantly, your sediment. You get sediment from pulling characters, and this becomes quite a precious resource, especially later in the game. It can become a bit difficult to keep up with it every month. So, first thing you do not let a month period pass without purchasing the Prototype Horizon and the Time Loop copy. Additionally, until you have it, I would strongly recommend purchasing 1 copy of this wheel per month until you get it to E3. After E3, it's really up to you. But this is one of the best wheels in the game. I think, in my opinion, but probably in general, honestly. And it's an especially good wheel early game as well because of the guaranteed key flare. Apart from that, so this, obviously, luminous cores are good, but only buy these when you're certain you can afford everything else. And these, even more so, I would not generally recommend purchasing these unless you're packing a lot of heat with sediment. Investigation exchange. This is okay, sorry. So when you're new, this is where you will see the enlightens for the Awakeners Dol and Ogia and Luton. You should buy all of those out each month. There's no problem with that. Once you've done that, you can also buy the Remembrance Quills each week, I think, which let me do now. I think that's a good use. This is kind of, it's up to you. It's kind of useless because it's such a small amount. Lightless Exchange. Okay, this. Get the Luminous Cores when you can. And eventually you'll be able to buy all of these wheels each month. And you should do that when you can do so. But until then, which I'll explain how exactly you get more darkness in a little bit. Until then, I would really prioritize, I would generally prioritize this wheel first out of everything because it's a good wheel for a lot of, quite a lot of damage dealers, even though it's the optimal wheel for very few. And then this is, okay, this is a problematic wheel because, put briefly, it's very good at E3 on certain characters, but before E3, it's quite useless, in my opinion. And Deathless Ascent is also a very good filler wheel. Once you max it, it becomes very good, actually, but when you max this, you won't be needing a little guide anymore, I'll say that much. The deep dive exchange, okay, this is the controversial one. Firstly, well, actually, I'll go through dailies in a little bit. Deep dive exchange, okay, so whether you're playing Caro or not, I would prioritize Aegis Enlightens very highly. Her Enlightens are very, very good. Aurata Enlightens are also powerful if you have an interest in Aurata, if you're building equal combo teams. But the issue of Aurata is she requires fairly specific teams, mostly an Awakener called Corpusant. But otherwise, yep, she's good. Erica is also a good character, but the problem is, at most, you can get 27,000 pills per month long term. When you're starting out, you'll get a bit more because of first completion rewards. Which, if I just, what would they be? Sugar. Well, here I am trying to reveal. Huh. Well, I didn't pre-prepare this, but there should be... Okay, I haven't claimed all the trophies rewards since I'm not a big fan of this mode. Yeah, if you go to the records here, there's one for deep dive as well. You can see one-time only pill rewards are here. Which, incidentally, if you want extra pulls, you know what to do. But the deep dive... Okay, so the one-time deep dive rewards will keep you afloat for a little while. And with that, I would still recommend this wheel for early game, Winter's Requiem. This used to be a very strongly recommended wheel, but I think it's fallen off a bit, and this is also a very good wheel. You only get 27,000 a month long term, not including events. That means you cannot get everything or even most things you want. Me personally, I would recommend prioritizing Aegis Aurata and Erica shards, and then try to get the wheels to E3 if possible. Within the wheels themselves, depends on your playstyle. Core Meltdown is more of a late game wheel, so probably get Winter's Requiem first, in my opinion. And then also, it's minor, but it adds up. Make sure to open this tab every day and claim your daily allowance. So, onto the dailies themselves now. So, it says it itself in the curriculum. So I think for most people playing, you'll be familiar by now. But I do want to say, so the first progression you should really pursue getting into the game is to be able to do Phantasmal Dive 7. And bear in mind, you can, of course, use supports. How do you get good supports? Well, if you go to here, you can either go to search and just refresh over and over and follow everyone who has quite a... Oh, it's an interesting Awakener, for example. Follow everyone who has a pretty decent Awakener. Or you can ask for people's UIDs and enter it here. Or alternatively, you might not have as good of luck with this, but you can search through. I recommend going down a bit because the top ones are quite overoccupied. But most people on this list are quite generous and up to date with unfollowing people who've quit the game or gone inactive and following back. It's up to you, really. But use that to get a powerful Awakener that you're comfortable with, especially someone like Halo Katana, I wouldn't really recommend to wheel if you're new to the game, actually, but you know, Halo Katana, just someone who can hard carry, Katagura even. You want to do this every day when possible, because this is what gives you the 900 pills. It's also part of a weekly, and this is obviously a very good source of standard pulls. Not too much to say other than that. This is important to prioritize when it comes to scores. Now, this is a bit more of an issue. But if you go and check through, you can see what the score requirement for Master of Dreams for today is. iCore is usually 41,400. Car Ultra is all over the place, which is my preferred demographic. It really is hard to tell, and you can either aim for Master of Dreams, Deep Dive Master. Just make sure you know what you're aiming for, and then go for the easiest score possible within it. Now remember, you need to complete all of the sub-objectives, and then it'll give you 3,000 points, which will then go through the multiplier. So for example, times 50 multiplier, 45,000, right? So why even do this? Because obviously it's a bit of a pain in the ass. It's because it's the main source of this resource. Now, if you're new to the game and haven't completed Arc 1, or relatively new, because Arc 1 does take a long time to complete, of course, this will be a resource that is somewhat frivolous. But you will want to start working on it, because the more you manage to accrue before getting to Arc 2, the more easy the transition to Arc 2 will be. But with that being said, just getting anything, and ideally, if you cannot get a good score, just do it in a relatively unoccupied, unpopular realm type. For example, Pure Chaos and iQuo Ultra, I think, are particularly unpopular. Car Ultra is not very popular either. And once you turn that in, you'll at least get, for example, Dream Apprentice, Deep Dive Scholar with minimal effort. It adds up, right? It's all about adding up. So for more dailies and weeklies, every week you should do this at the highest tier available, but after completing chapter 6, you'll unlock this, which will let you do it at level 55 early. But honestly, unless you're extremely, and I mean extremely down bad for resources, I don't really recommend how much longer it takes to clear this stage compared to just running the lower level version of the stage like this you'll probably have available for a lesser reward. But it is once a week, so it's your choice. Dtide, this is part of the, well, this is the main, I guess it's debatable. I guess most would say it's the main endgame. But we don't need to talk about endgame. What we need to talk about is, firstly, I don't recommend doing it last minute like I do each week. That's not a poor idea. What we need to talk about is Dtide progression. In the first place, this unlocks in, say, chapter 6 or 7. So maybe I'm skipping the buck to mid-game a little here. But as soon as you're able to, you just want to be able to get a 300 pointer, because you get a lot of rewards just for clearing 300 points, really. And 300 points should be quite easy. The monsters in most of these are very easy in Alert 1. They're about equivalent to chapter 5 enemies, chapter 6 enemies, generally, if not a little easier. The problem is, you're just going to need characters. You can use support, and you should use support to carry one of the waves, of course, but you're just going to need a total of 19 characters, right? Of some amount of quality. So don't be too stingy with your standard pulls, but also make sure to accrue a good amount of enlightens on your preferred team, which I'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes. Just getting that 300 locked in is what I encourage you to do at first, especially in your first few weeks of playing. Within the first month or two, you can definitely push to getting 325s. 325, not too difficult. It just requires more levels on the Awakeners and more skill levels, which you might get time gated by in terms of your resources. 350 is also provides very good rewards, but that is significantly more challenging, and you'll benefit from more keeper level and more access to limited Awakeners. My advice is don't drive yourself crazy trying to get 350s immediately. You do not need a lot of this resource early on. But if you feel confident about your team, feel free to push it up to an alert 3, and with a support you can even try alert 4 once you're nice and familiar with the game. But this is, just don't burn yourself out on this, seriously. Like, I know I'm mostly providing an educational guide here, but I have met so many people who've driven themselves crazy, just crazy, just with the Dtides, forcing themselves for it. Okay, so make sure to fill out the daily quest. By the way, every time you ticket it with Field Agent, you don't need to do the daily quest. And there's a new event. Every 2 weeks, there will be the following things to do. You've got the Awakener tryouts. This is just free money. Make sure to do it. You have the event of the week, which again, you can borrow Awakeners for this to do higher tiers, but it's not especially required to do high tiers. It's nice, but as you can see, so say 65 and 40, the challenge is quite limited. You can just do 65 once on the stage you want to reenact on over and over, which I would recommend waiting until the last stage for that to spam reenacts. Apart from that, do make sure to use all 4 realms. This is one of the achievements. Just fill out the list. Apart from the madnesses, it's up to you. If you have a good support Awakener, they are very doable. Again, just picking a hard carry support, and you can ecog for them, but it is quite a limited. I mean, 1/4 of a pull per stage is not worth losing sleep over, put it that way. And then just make sure to, in terms of buying out the shops, you shouldn't run into too many issues in terms of not having enough event currency, as long as you invest enough energy, Menafin, into the event. But in terms of your priorities, Pure Core, Lumicore, Iterix Shard, Mimetic, D-Jewels and Black Offerings, if these come up, absolutely get them. Get all of these because these are rare time-gated items. The rest is to be prioritized as you need. And that is the entirety of the dailies and the weeklies, I believe. Oh, the assignment system. How could I forget? This is surprisingly important. So assignments, you really want to level up some amount of Awaken as soon as possible. It will take you a little while to unlock these, but so the Mithril Trace assignment, Recon plans. Oh, they finally fixed this. Oh my gods. This was bugged for years, by the way. Sorry to point out. This didn't used to give any extra XP. Actually was bugged since I started playing until about now. That's very funny. Okay, so Mithril Trace, Recon plans, A Priori, Pantheism, and Phantom Realm, these all give extra XP opportunities when you overflow the level limit. So just make sure, on these missions specifically, make sure to stuff as many high-level Awakeners as possible, right? It really increases your XP per day. And believe me, XP is just the bread and butter, especially when you're getting into mid-game. It is such a grind. It is so time-gated, and it makes the game much easier to be of a high keeper level. Not only because of certain unlocks in the early to mid-60s, like Dream of Medicine. This is a very important covenant for, say, Corpusant, to wheel, etc. But also just to have more team HP. How does the team HP even work? All of your team's con stats are added together and then multiplied by the keeper level multiplier, which goes from like 0.7 or something pathetic all the way to 2.6. So it's a massive differential with time. Okay, so sorry to people listening for whom, oh yeah, make sure to like people every week. Like, believe me, it's just nice. Getting all of these rewards and getting them as fast as possible is very helpful. Even if you don't take the battle pass, I personally don't. Speaking of which, if you are interested in the battle pass, I should cover low spending as well. I didn't actually write that down because I'm very intelligent. In terms of the battle pass, if you have an Awakener that uses this wheel proficiently, this is a very good wheel, albeit you really need to get it to E3 to see effectiveness. Once you buy this once on the battle pass, you can buy additional copies in the shop each month, so that helps. Awakeners that use this wheel include Daffodil, 24. Really, a lot of Awakeners can use it, but it's basically any character that does damage and then does a proc based on that damage. You could also do it with Kaikus, technically, if you don't like living. The other wheels, this is a good wheel, but is kind of semi-power crept. You don't need to worry about it too much, but it does have a very consistent effect. And this wheel is unique, firstly, because it's good at E0, and secondly, because it's very useful, if not semi-mandatory, for certain max HP based scaling comps in Arc 2. But that's pretty late on, so don't worry. All of these wheels in general, they're all very good wheels, but they're not mandatory. You don't need to feel like, oh no, if I don't get this wheel, like, obviously it's a gotcha. It's pay to win. There's some elements of it, but the battle pass specifically, you don't have to feel too pressured about it. It's nice to have them, especially for late mid game, but you can do everything in this game as free to play. It's just a question of time. Like, people talk about skill, and there is some skill in it, but mostly it's just time. So just my advice is just to enjoy the game and read stuff, God forbid, as well. So that covers all the dailies and weeklies, which took surprisingly long, but I see a lot of misconceptions with that, a lot of people asking what to buy, etc. So I wanted to cover that. Okay, so starting out, how do I say this? So starting out, obviously, you'll just be looking at, whoa. Oh, the prologue. I was confused then. Starting out, you'll just be going through the early game chapters. And I just recommend doing that. Even with the default team, you don't have to go crazy pulling. But you can try to complete what achievements you can and pick up the 20 silver pickup in each stage, but don't go crazy over it. It's okay if you miss some. And you just progress. Up to chapter 4 final boss, you shouldn't really have any issues. Just make sure to equip good wheels, which I'll come to in another section, which will be marked. Just make sure to equip good early game wheels. And buy good relics. I probably will not exhaustively go through each relic, but you know, it's a roguelike. You'll get used to what's good for your team. I'll bring up the relic list and point out some good ones. Once you get to chapter 5, this stage with Goliath is probably the first power spike kind of stage. It mostly comes in the sense that the enemies hit very hard if you can't immediately kill them. So at this point in the game, and when you're low level in general, offense is really the best defense, unless you have Ichor and can kind of just use tentacles as your offense. But even shielding with Ichor is kind of a tall order because they will hit harder than your shield. Now, once you've gotten to chapter 5 or so, you should start on the hard story stages. Because hard story 1 and 2 are easier, really. 3 is also manageable. And then after 4 and 5, mostly with 5, it starts to get noticeably a bit more difficult. This stage can be quite difficult. In hard stages specifically, you don't want to use emergency... God, I've missed a lot of achievements here. Funny. You don't want to miss emergency gnosis. Sorry. You get rewarded for not using an emergency gnosis. But you don't need to worry too drastically about not doing so. Ultimately, to get through the stage and just get the ratings is what's important. Aside from that, we've also got the operations, the special ops, and the psyche deep dives, and the dreamscapes as well. Now, what would I recommend? Oh, there's a new one. I have not logged on today. So, in terms of, you'll start with Ogias anyways. In terms of what to unlock, other people have written good guides on this subject, but some particularly, Posses are quite team dependent, but some particularly good things to unlock would be Ramona Time Worn's story, mostly for its place in the story, and for her if you want her, although she's not that good early game. You can also take Goliath's posse is a fairly strong posse. Katagura's posse is not bad as well. But admittedly, I actually kind of recommend going towards the special ops. In fact, the first thing I would probably unlock is Miriam's Dreamscape, because you get a massive amount of pulls just for reading through her story or ignoring it if you prefer. Then for the special ops, you're just going to want to start working on them. I would probably recommend doing... To be honest, a lot of these posses are more useful late game than early game. But I think Lily's posse and Horla's posse are good safe options. But mostly they just have a lot of stages. Like, even though they cost a whole week to unlock. But overall, it's your preference. Just pick whatever character you're interested in as well. But just make sure not to let these overflow as long as you can. And there's also these, which is not really as sexual as the name implies generally. It's a bit of a bait, as you might be unsurprised by. These unlock through character affinity, and you can get... Don't prioritize these. They only give you a single pull, basically. Okay, so now, of course, like, I start talking about the characters, which is a bit more interesting. Because, of course, you can't play the game without characters, right? I'll start with the realm studies. Okay. Oh, geez. Yeah, I'll briefly cover every single Awakener, which is going to be funny. So you've got your 4 realms here, and this is where you're going to want to start out. Well, actually, when you begin, you'll have a pop-up called... I've forgotten the name of it, and I did not write it down. You'll have a pop-up to summon for a free character of your choice. I would recommend... It really depends on your preference. So I would personally recommend, if you don't have someone in mind already or someone you like the look of, Faint is a great choice because she provides so much safety with the death resistances and the an adequate shielding in the early game. But Helot is, who, by the way, I have this character like maxed on another account, just not on this one. Halot is a good She's a good damage dealer in general, but particularly a good early game damage dealer. You pretty much just spam this card, Lasting Loaf, and that'll just take you straight through the first few chapters. With the character Jenkins here, it's the same principle. You use her strong AoE attacks. That would honestly be about all I recommend. But you can also, ask people on Discord. Just look around at characters I like. But I would mostly recommend Faint, Jenkin, Helop, maybe Winkle. If you don't have someone specific in mind. You can also get, people often say Nautila, but this character falls off really early game, offensively speaking. She's a very good character. But she's based on temporary counter, and put simply, this card, early game it just kills everything, but only in the very early game. Even by chapter 5, enemies are too tanky to die to it is the problem. Okay, so you'll have that, and then going for the realm study, you've got, I should get it up on this, I think. Where is it? Not this. Interludes, sorry. Yeah, so I'll go through every Awakeners that listed, really. So firstly, if you are brand new, personally I'm a big fan of the Caro banner. And I obviously started with Caro. I've always played Caro. I'll explain Caro in more detail later in the video, because I haven't played Ultra through early game, even though Ultra is very good with Jenkin. And also you can get, well, let me just go chronologically. Okay, so Chaos Banner. This is not a banner I would heavily prioritize pulling on, but you can get a little bit of it. Nymphia, she is a poison damage character. You normally have to pair with another damage character. Not because she does terrible damage, but just because that's how poison works. Poison is multiplicative. You have multiple characters that apply poison, multiple characters that trigger poison. After she got buffed, this character is pretty good, but still a pretty poor early game character. Especially if you don't get a character called 24, who is also on this banner. You can get Lily in 24 as random chances when you roll on this banner, because they are very old limited characters. But I'll tell you this for free, don't bet on it. When you get an SSR, you have a 1/10th chance for it to be either of these two. So 1/20th each, basically. So obviously the vast majority is just going to be taken up by these, and there's no pity on that at all. You can roll 3 SSRs and get free 24, or you can roll 30 SSRs over like 1,000, not 1,000. You can roll 30 SSRs over about 650 pulls, standard pulls, and get nothing in that regard. Okay, Alva. This is mostly a situational character late game. I'm just repeated myself. She is not a bad character, but a bit outdated, kind of waiting on a buff. How you build her is essentially just as a shield stacker. She can help get rid of seal and symptoms from your hand. Pandia. Oh boy. Okay, she's actually a pretty decent character early game with a full counter build, but just don't bet on her. This character is, I won't go full tier list head, because truthfully almost all the characters in this game can be used at least somewhere. But this character is up there for the worst in the game at the moment. What she does do is she removes counter from enemies permanently, which is a pretty useful trait. Nautila is basically a defensive shielder who can also provide Aliemus to exalt for people. The exalt is a very good defensive exalt, mostly because it multiplies your block. However, because of that, you want to use it at the very end of your turn, basically, after using Silency, Devour Shield, all of your shielding skills and defense. And then you can use your ultimate. And then it should provide, even early game, a couple hundred shield. It also does counter applicable damage, which is not usually something you get massive amounts of use out of, but can be powerful. Oh god, I'm already at 35 minutes just with the beginner guide. Okay, Karen. This character is an Arithmetica support. She is there as a passive member of the team, and when you exalt, she basically gives you a card that's good for free Arithmetica. That's all you need to do. No. Sangha. This is an investment-heavy defensive scaling character. This character essentially usually requires Overexalt to work and just a lot of stats to work. Basically, the more shields you can accrue on a total team, the more damage she does for her exalt. But she is not very good until the mid to late game, really. Celeste. This character is very strong. Especially early game, because her ult is, she provides a little Arithmetica, and most of all, her ult is a guaranteed revive, like absolutely guaranteed. Technically you can use it every 6 turns, but that's hard to do. Now, how the revive works, I should be careful my wording of revive. How the revive works, when you take lethal damage, you restore a bunch of health. If you take additional hits, you can still go to death resistance or just death. It is used before your death resistance. Pharos. This is a character. Actually, she has a good early game because her strikes, all of her cards force tentacles to attack, but she's mostly for hand control. If you're familiar with roguelike card games, which you should be, of course, she draws cards, she searches cards. And she's better than people give her credit for, but still, I mean, actually, this is a pretty accurate summary. Kaikus is a very well-known character. Powerful HP healing. Don't rely on this guy's healing. They're a counter carry. They can be either used as a counter carry or a passive support. But Nuck 1, they're mostly going to be your carry. Goliath is not a... They can function as a damage dealer early game, and in fact, kind of should. But after that, they are a pure support. You use that exalt with usurp, basically, and then your tentacles go massive. Lei, this character is not very good early game, but she is a very good character. She's just very backloaded. Because she has poor stats and all of her scalings. Her scalings are strong, but a lot of her most important scalings are on lost HP percentage. So when you have a higher keeper level and a beefier team and more enlightens on Lei, this healing effect gets much more effective. And the thing is, with a Ties Devour, it can restore about 31% with how the math works of your lost HP if you're close to nothing, which is massive. That's like a 600 heal. If not more for many teams. Problem is, that's late game. Probably don't use her early game. Feint, she gives you death resistances. Death resistance is kind of a broken mechanic in the game, because not only can you use it as essentially a way to deflect any single instance of damage, it also gives you Arithmetica, draws, etc. Halot is the Caro early game DPS if you are not planning to pull on a special banner character. With Halot, I wanted to explain more in her own section, but essentially every time you play a strike, she gains permanent crit damage. Every turn that passes, she gains exponentially scaling base damage on her key skill, Shattering Strike. So you want to run a kind of defensive team which can help her do her job. And then you just use her exalt, and then lasting loaf. They do massive damage and clear the way. Shattering strike with a crit for bosses will one-shot bosses until for quite a while in the game, probably until about like mid-chapter 7 usually, I think. And then you have to wise up a little. Agrippa is she's a good filler character. She's better in Arc 2 actually. She's a good filler character. Her main talent is that if you provide her devours, she can give permanent alert. Permanent alert is a stat that is basically not seen for the most part in the game. So she can be used on stall teams, or she can be used as an embryo generating filler because Reluctant Arms is a good card. Uvhash. Don't play this character early game. I say this is an Uvhash main. They are so dependent on stats and overexalt to function. But they are a strong burst DPS kind of damage character later in the game. Cassia, yeah, this character's not that great either. She is useful for Dtide though, for certain cheesy setups. She's mostly for, as it says, she's mostly for card draw. She provides card draw, and she has a card called Telekinesis, which you can use to play cards twice as well. Jenkins is an amazing early game damage dealer. In Arc 2, she requires her image a bit, but you don't need to worry about that. Basically, she's a damage dealer you can't go wrong with. You just use her Exalt and Get 'em Brown to stack Get 'em Brown over and over, and then you swarm attack. Liz is actually a good character, but it's not really that she's hard to play. She requires a very specific team, and usually premium supports like Lily to function. So I wouldn't recommend her early in the game, but you can try them out if you want. Tinkt is also a late game character, but she is a good character. She's basically for making huge damage setups with Ultra, which is kind of outside the scope of this video. But nonetheless, Winkle, her defenses are not very good. She is basically an Aliemus transfer character. She converts... Now, AoE Aliemus provided to the whole team, is the most effective way to generate Aliemus in the game. And then she puts it onto your damage dealer Awakener of choice. That's essentially her main purpose. Okay, for past limiteds, Lily, 24, Tulu, Murphy, Sorrel, Salvador, and Daffodil can all be gotten out of the Naught banner. Daffodil is an amazing character. Sorrel requires a lot of investment to work. Salvador is an amazing character. Tulu, great character, requires a lot of investment. And Murphy is a character you slap on any team, and she bolsters your defense. Although her first Enlighten really provides a lot of juice. You realize how complicated this game is, honestly. To say nothing of the fact 24 has 4 forms, but if you just experiment and do the trials, which you get bonuses for doing the trials, so I recommend, you'll understand the characters better, even though it is a bit turgid. Okay, so now we'll go on to Awakening. So with your realm studies, pick a realm and try to get all of the Awakeners you're actively using to E3. That's what I do first. Once you have all of the Awakeners at E3, you can get a specific ward or two, Wheel of Destiny you need or two to E3, but don't go crazy on it. I would recommend trying to get key over exalts, if anything, and just getting a wider selection of characters that are somewhat effective before going deep. But then you can start working on your projects of getting E3 plus 12 wheels. Because when a wheel is E3 plus 12, you can use 2 SSR wheels instead of 1, which is kind of BS, but nonetheless is the case. And there are some that are quite effective with this, like Blade of the Titan. For the limited banners, put simply, so unless when you really need characters for Dtide, getting characters to E0 or E1 is fine. And even recommended. But for the most part, I would recommend pulling characters you want to actively use on a main team to at least E3. Well, at least C2. It varies character to character, but there are almost no characters in the game which have an E3 which is bad or useless. In fact, most of them are very, very good. After Enlighten 3, that's where you start seeing less value per copy. And yes, I am suggesting you get 4 copies of an Awakener. Does that sound unrealistic? It's not if you're disciplined with... I haven't spent any money in this game since last year. So this is all farm silver. In fact, I used to have more. This is about, it's about 500 pulls farmed or so. Well, 450. And 450 pulls. Basically, there's some dispute over it, but the average amount per copy of an Awakener is supposed to be 42. So if you save up, you can invest those pulls into a character. You can also use the Prototype Horizons and Loot Master to build them up. For wheels are actually a bit easier to get because you can only fill them once, so they're like 33, I think, average. But you should only get wheels that you definitely need. And somewhat annoyingly, most wheels are not good at E0. It's with these kind of premium wheels, I would say usually E3 or go home. If you're starting out, I forgot the Sun banner. If you're seeing this very soon after it came out, Kaleido Recollections is a good way to fill out your account as a new player. It can be a good banner in general. This just gives you old limited characters only. Well, I say old. It includes a lot of very, very strong characters like to wheel. Well, characters are not really delineated in strength by their age in this game, unlike a lot of gacha games. For example, Salvador, this is one of the oldest characters, like the 3rd or 4th limited. Very, very good to this day. So this is good to fill out your account. You can, and maybe probably should put limited pulls here as a newer player, to kind of see what you get to work with. Other than that, if you do want to spend, this is a decent way to spend. Although every few months they do a pre-order, which is a pre-order before releasing a new major Awakener, which is the quote-unquote best deal in the game. For $30, you get 130 pulls and then 1 Awakener, basically Awakener, Enlighten Selector, and 1 Loot Master, right? So that's a lot of value. It's roughly like 210 pulls of value for the money. Chronos Mandate, this is okay, I should probably cover this. So if you go through the Awakener list, basically with Chronos Mandate, you can get both the Awakener and their wheel that you select. It's been improved, so it's now not as bad as it used to be, but I won't get into that. So for Chronos Mandate, I would only ever recommend selecting Ties, because her wheel is the best in the game and she's an amazing Awakener. Or Hello Katana, if you like. I would try her out first with supports if you like her playstyle, because her wheel is important. Or you can get to wheel as well if you love her. Hauler is also not a bad choice, technically. She is a very good character. But do not pick any character on this who does not have a good wheel, basically. Whew, I am not used to talking loudly and quickly this much. But I at least covered the Awakener details and the basics, right? Yeah, not sure how helpful that is, but I'll make sure to timestamp it. I think I'll move on to a brief, well, oh no, the wheels. Almost forgot. Okay, right. Team lineup. This is the most important thing of all. Geez. Okay, so make sure to set up your teams with covenants and with wheels. So what you need to know is the early game SSR is not always better, and SR is often not better either. The most important wheels of all are some of the rare ones, particularly. So a lot of them aren't actually noted. This should be on somewhere on your team early game, because it gives you a guaranteed key release, which is the special ability, the Posse ability. If you know you're going to use an emergency gnosis, bring this, otherwise don't. This is also amazing because early game you generate much less Aliemus, so these kind of flat Aliemus gen wheels become incredibly good. This should always be on any team in Arc 1, non-negotiably. Arguably same with Frenzy, unless for some reason you have a weird team that doesn't want cursed relics. Both of these just let you buy more relics and high quality relics. Gluttony should be on every team starting out. The max HP gives you so much flexibility because so many effects in this game, especially shields like Ichor Shield and Caro Shield, depends on your max HP in the first place. Punishment can be good if you have the death res to spare. The others I wouldn't really recommend. You can take Insight potentially. It can help as well. Let me take my headphones off. These damn headphones are weighing me down. Yeah, I feel a little better now. Okay, so with the wheels, let me just. Okay, I was just gonna say, let me do a quick team lineup something, because I just want to do an example of making an early game team. So, say I wanted to make a shitty Chaos Wheel team. You can just select your basic characters. I guess those will do. And then, yeah, just fill it out. But just don't sleep on the rare wheels. And in terms of posses, Tiny Wish you get at the end of Chapter 2. I cannot believe how much those heavy headphones are actually restraining my ability to breathe. That is funny. So Tiny Wish, at the end of Chapter 2, very, very good early game posse because, again, you just need that flat Aliemus. Mouse Wisdom is also good to play your cards. Other than that, some standouts include that honestly, many posses are good, but by the time you need to use them in Dtide and stuff, you should understand most of their purpose. Lone Seed is very good for certain damage dealers. Mountain's Resolve if you absolutely need to draw cards of an Awakener, and Festival of Tides if you just need draws in a Rift is very, very nice. Okay, so what next? What next? I think to everyone who just came for a generic guide. Oh, nice. I'm not sure how helpful it would have been, but this is probably the end of the generic guide, and I'll start talking about Caro at this point for a little while. And then we'll finish up. So thanks everyone who listened this far. So getting into Caro, I should just open an interlude drill or something. So firstly, with the Caro mechanics, I'll just quickly go in a stage. So how the Caro mechanics actually work is a little vague. So it does actually say how embryo fusion works. When you hit 100%, this generates an embryo. And that can be used to give Aliemus, or perhaps sometimes as importantly as well for temporary crit rate, and also to trigger the Devour effects of Exalts. Just make sure that your Devour effect is worth 30 Aliemus, basically. That's your key takeaway. It needs to be worth the Aliemus you're giving up. So certain effects are just not worth it early game, so keep that in mind. Or for example, I just says Exalt, you only want to devour once in a fight. So so this is actually misleading because it says it turns start embryo fusion plus 30%, but the thing is, the less HP you have, the more you get per turn. It should, yeah, now it says 34%. That actually goes up to at least double at the end. So the lower HP you are, the more powerful Caro becomes. This is the same with the Devour Shield as well. The lower HP you are, the bigger the Devour Shield is. So ideally, you don't want to be too high on HP if possible to get more advantage from the Embryo Fusion and the Furnace. Each turn, you get a passive amount of Furnace as well. It's based on your max HP, 3% for non-pure. So Caro with Chaos gets 6% and everyone else gets 3% per turn. And at the end of combat, you get a large amount regardless, which is the same. So usually, unless you especially want to stay on low HP, when this starts getting full, just make sure to use it again. And then you can, just keep going, right? So with this would be so funny if it doesn't kill. Okay, it's gonna be like, of Hush better not be that sad. So, and keep in mind that it goes up a bit at the end of combat, right? So you want to be using it in advance, but also try to save it to block hits specifically. Otherwise it just becomes useless chip damage. Your Devour Shield and your Furnace needs to be your first line of defense against losing death resistances, because death resistances are your most precious resource, really. So in terms of the Caro Awakeners, I'm not going to exhaustively go through them, but Ufhash is a very strong carry with, I actually have a full guide with them if you look on the official Discord. They're a very strong carry with Overexalt and with a high level. This is not just for show. So not only would I recommend OE, I would recommend pulling on standard a lot more, which is quite difficult. This didn't cost any money. It just took a long time. It took months, basically, right? So just keep that in mind, that it's not the most instant gratification sort of thing. The reason the levels are so important is because you play dozens of this card, and the higher level you are, the higher the strength. So it's, and then that becomes exponentially more, right? With their strength scaling. Aegis is an absolute core Caro member, especially in late Arc 1. She has the ability to AoE stun enemies. It's the only AoE stun in the game. It's once per combat, but it's still incredibly useful to make all the enemies lose a turn. She also applies permanent vulnerable, which if you don't have another source of keep in mind, a lot of people take vulnerable for granted, but if you don't have another source of vulnerable that keeps it permanently applied, that's a 50% damage boost. You need to have vulnerable, and you'll probably need to have weak on the enemies most of the time to survive the heavy hits they're putting out. But vulnerable is absolutely non-negotiable with how Caro works. Hela Katena is, she's an amazing character. The only reason I recommend to try her out is because not everyone likes her playstyle. Her playstyle can be technically not the very best in the very early levels, but it's only a very early levels thing. She is an exponentially scaling damage dealer, which they had to change the whole game just to fuck her over a bit, and it still didn't really work. With that being said, she's not a free ticket out of everything, and you're going to need pretty good supports to make her work, as well as skill levels. I didn't really go for this exhaustively, but do not chicken out on the skill levels, especially on strikes and defense. It's very important to raise these, especially if they have a secondary effect. But in general, strikes and defense are important. And you should try to get them all to level 5 realistically as quickly as possible. Even more so than exalt ranks for most characters. I'm not going through this very methodically, but that's fine. We'll just go through it as we see them in our box, huh? Ties. Okay, Ties is one of the best characters in the game. She generates a lot of embryos. She provides the unique Scion mechanic. The Scion mechanic lets you produce embryos, which give 1.5 times the amount of Polyamous and crit, and probably more importantly, give you a doubled effect when you devour them. So you just double the devour effect. And this is absolutely obscene with certain effects. Like, say, with Songin Feathers on Helot Katana, you draw 2 Helot command cards and reduce all of her cards by 2 instead of 1. With Ufhash, this multiplier goes up twice. With Ties, you give everyone 30 instead of 15, etc., etc. It's an amazing effect. But just do be cognizant of the fact that the game prioritizes embryos to devour rather than scions. So if you need a scion devour, you're going to have to either turn the embryo into a scion via using a posse, or you are going to have to directly feed the embryo to someone. Other than that, she just provides amazing Team Polyamous and Keyflare as well. The Team Polyamous is probably the thing she's most underestimated for. A lot of Caro characters are extremely Polyamous hungry. And she is... It's pretty... I mean, it's pretty like, for a lot of teams, she just makes the game so much more comfortable and so much easier, even if she's not technically mandatory. Agrippa is... The summary I gave on her was pretty accurate, actually. The only thing I should say is that from a Caro perspective, she does give a surprisingly large amount of strength, but her main use case is that the permanent alert, pretty good embryo fusion. Reluctant Arms is really good with Ties, because you can often, if you use this card correctly, it can be about 90% embryo fusion or 95%. So it's a really good card. It becomes about as good as Ties' Sacred Blood Instinct. In those cases, it's not as flexible. She provides a lot of shield instances, which is very useful with sources of alert like her own, and source of temporary alert as well. Feint is a character you're going to be seeing a lot and you should get used to. She is the only character in the game who can give you endurance that carries over between fights, with her Cradle of Stars giving you more and more death resistance and a higher death resistance cap. I actually did not really use Feint as a kind of twist until recently on this account, as a kind of twisted self-imposed challenge. That's how good she is. Not using her at all, at least conditionally, is basically a challenge run. Lei, I gave a summary earlier, and that still fits. Okay, Sorel. I love this character. Sorel, sadly, her overexalt is basically required to make her be able to go to late game. She can still do some content before then, but she's very, very dependent on her overexalt. And accordingly, I just cannot recommend her unless you are quite a big spender. She is... like with Ufhash, the way that Ufhash is very dependent on levels, very dependent on skills and stuff being given to them, Sorel is the same. The difference is it's limited pulls for her, not standard pulls. Of course, you can theoretically get her off standard banner, but the odds of doing so are basically like close to a quarter of Ufhash, a bit over a quarter. If you get lucky, you can consider it though. Salvador, okay, I should briefly go over this guy's playstyle. Oh yeah, in terms of her playstyle, basically all about that 1-turn nuke, really. the more embryos you feed to Carousel of Ambition, the more damage it does, but more importantly, the more healing it gives and the more temporary strength it gives. Why is that so important? Because when you use the Overexalt, you use ties to triplicate Elegance of Rose, and then each of those Elegance of Roses is played twice, which does gargantuan damage. Like it can do hundreds of thousands. And then also gives you a massive heal, like basically you heal your whole health bar back. That combo is amazing. The problem is she is rigidly locked into that combo. The less you put into a combo, the less effective it is to an exponential degree, basically. Because if you put less embryos in and you don't get the scythe hits off, you do less damage, gain less strength, and heal less, right? So that's why she's so dependent. Salvador. Essentially, the only problem with this character is that they're a little keeper level dependent. Otherwise, they are just broken. You get as much max HP as possible. An End of Suffering. You keep your HP high when possible. And then use redemption. You use the dedication effect to over and over to lose HP, put it in the Crimson Furnace. Then you either eat the Crimson Furnace or use redemption to gain it as a shield. And you just keep going. The more times you do this, the more permanent scaling you get. Until eventually your End of Suffering and your strikes start doing quite obscene damage. In addition to the character just being obscenely beefy on the correct teams. I don't feel like that exhaustively describes their playstyle, but if you just try them out, you'll see. There's a lot of Salvador content online, I think, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert on this character. Helot, I love this character. Okay, so firstly, you do want to get her E3. Her Overexalt is very handy, but not as needed as Ufhash is, but nice to work towards, because this 25% crit damage is completely permanent. So Helot's playstyle, you want tools which allow her to crit. You want tools and teammates which allow her to stall a little bit. Every time she plays a strike, you get permanent scaling. Every time you use Surviving Impasse, you get permanent scaling. Every turn that passes after using Vengeance Upon Me, which you should use as quickly as possible, she gains permanent scaling. She's one of the queens of permanent scaling. And then you play fairly passively. Up until you use Surviving Impasse with or without Overexalt, and use a bunch of Lasting Loaves to crowd your hand with as many strikes as possible. We're talking like 10 strikes from you and the teammates. And bear in mind, Shattering Strike and Lasting Loaf also count as strikes. Then you use Shattering Strike. Just make sure you can use this, whether it's through Mouse Wisdom, Ramona Exalt, or just having enough in the first place. This is also a pretty good triplicate with low Enlightened Ties. Oh, I am a little bloated. Apologies. From too much energy drink. First thing after having about a 2-hour sleep. But Shattering Strike is... So when this says, in your hand, increase base damage by 15%, that 10% is actually additive to that. So after a few turns, this becomes 45% per, for example, or 55%, rather than what it would seem to say. That's why it becomes so extraordinarily powerful. She is, however, quite a relatively complex character to play, but that's part of the reason I recommend trying her out early and seeing if you like her and can deal with her. There's many people who've said that it's fine. She also just has really big base damage, and base damage gets you through the early game very easily. Dorsane, I'll just cover briefly because they're not likely to come up on banner for a long time. Another very good early game character. If you do have them available, they're basically the most stable Caro DPS. They are, in my view, they're the lowest damage output Caro main damage dealer. But to be fair, they still do a lot of damage. Caro's a very high damage archetype. But they don't, unlike other Caro Awakeners, they don't self-damage as much. Because, of course, self-damage is the controversial mechanic of Caro. The thing you need to get used to because it's current HP, right? So you just control it by keeping yourself on low HP and then using burst healing and shielding and strength gain to control it. Dorsane generates a huge amount of strength, and they actually heal quite a significant amount, especially early game, because their heal is based on flat numbers rather than max HP, which makes it better, way better early game and just okay late game. It's still good, but not as good comparatively. But they're just a very stable character. Unfortunately, they're not likely to be on banner for a long time. But if you like a big Exalt hitter with AoE follow-up, by all means, Pickman, same thing. They literally just went off the banner 12 hours ago at the time of recording this video. They're a mixed support, basically. And my gods, I could waffle about this guy for 30 minutes. I've got to be honest. They are a strange character. They have a mix of abilities, really. They have combo potential. Both of their chromophage can be huge for combos, especially if you have additional copies of it. They can give you copies of other Awakeners cards, although not consistently like with ties. You're at the mercy, to a degree, of the Discover mechanics. And then give you temporary relics, of which some of them are very powerful. They also generate a sizable amount of embryo fusion. The only problem with them is there's hardly any Awakeners in the game, not even Dorsane, their main intended partner, that makes use of every single piece of utility they have. For example, they're quite good with Helot Original, but this effect, this 10 the final damage shield and healing from over Awakeners exalts plus 15%, completely useless with Helot. Completely useless. And that's kind of the story of Pickman in a lot of cases. That doesn't mean they're a bad character. It just means that, in a way, I wonder if they're supposed to support someone who's about to come out. But if you have them, if you pulled them, you can't... They are good to slap in on a 4th slot on a team, generally. Especially because Chromophage is another just high base damage auto crit scale. So, when it comes to car wheels, I want to point out some specific wheels that aid Caro more than usual, or just ones that are good in general. And then I want to go through a very, very basic team building guide, and then just close out the video. So, Blade of the Titan is a very good damage wheel on Uvhash and Helot Katena. Is it on Sorel too? I think most people use it on Sorel. Either that or Path Forsaken. Chains Unbound is okay. It's debatable, but Chains Unbound is probably the better secondary wheel on Katena if you have hers at like E3 plus 12. More importantly, it's the best wheel for Helot. This is also just a very good wheel in general. It's the best wheel for Helot Original, though. This wheel is very useful for Aegis and just useful in general if you don't have reliable vulnerable application. It helps, as a filler wheel, it helps you get through a lot of tough encounters. Merciful Nurturing, required wheel for Caro, late game. Okay. Is required an overstatement? It's not really. I mean, it's so... Put it this way, I was progressing through ARG2 hard mode. I did not have this wheel on this account for a long story, which I won't get into. I didn't have this wheel, and I was struggling in the ARG2 Chapter 2 hard mode stages. Really, really struggling. Then I got a copy of this wheel for Kaleido Recollections, put it to E3 with Loop Masters, and the stages became easy. It has such an insane series of effects. Hand size limit +2 is usually just a straight damage increase for Caro. It gives you amazing key flare. this is the best effect of all. Each time a posse is released, all Awakeners gain 6 LEMS. That's crazy. 24, you can, when you have enough keyflare, you can posse twice per turn. Obviously, in the early to mid game, that's not going to happen, but you should build towards eventually being able to keyflare twice per turn most of the time. That's 24 LEMS in total each time you posse. 48 if you can do it twice per turn. 48 LEMS per turn in addition to the other effects. And it also gives you 25% embryo fusion each time. 50% if you do it twice. So that's literally 60. Well, given that you will probably have Sun as well, but let's not count it. It's basically 63 LEMS per turn off a wheel if you can fund it. Plus the other effects. It's egregious. Lullaby Devoured, this is a very good wheel, mostly for Caro. I'm building it for Hola. If you don't have this at plus 12. So this Cradle is, as far as I'm aware, a final shield and HP multiplier, which makes it a very large amount of healing gain. Although I'm not 100% up on every minutiae of what it does and doesn't apply to. It's basically something that can help, especially with Storly Caro comms, but also just for buying another turn in a desperate situation. Is there anything else? Helot's wheel is very good. Not much to say. You should run some kind of hand size wheel. I'll say that much. I mean, fuck it. If you... excuse my language. Gods, I should have edited that out. But with ties... okay, no. Who cares? So with Ties' wheel, yeah, it's just such a good wheel, but you need the hand limit too. This game is questionably designed in that without that hand limit +2, certain comps are extremely painful to play. Not all comps, but for Caro comps specifically, apart from maybe, is there any Awakener who doesn't benefit tremendously from it? I guess Salvador can be played without it, but it's still nice to have them. Hand of Oblivion is a very good early game wheel for Helot Katana and some other characters because it gives multiplied strike, which for that matter, if you are using Helot or Helot Katana, Celestial Beast is great because it gives you strike multiplier as well. Duty's Gravitas gives you AoE Aliemus, Elevated Focus, but again, until you can fund posses regularly, mostly stick with rare wheels. Just run Merciful Nurturing and damage dealer wheels on your main damage, and then otherwise just use the support R wheels, the funding wheels. They genuinely will be stronger when you use them properly until a fair ways into the game, basically. But I will point out some particularly useful ones just quickly. This is an amazing wheel late game because, again, once you can fund 2 posses per turn, it's 30 Aliemus on the person of your choice. This is a good early game damage dealer wheel. Good Aliemus funding. This is potentially a good support wheel you can run for burst comps to give you more reliable crits early game. This is another very useful wheel in Arc 1. It just tends to give you a lot of Aliemus as well as having a good main stat and death resistance. Okay. Shit. I feel I don't really have time to go exhaustively through the relics. But I will just, if I can just level relic, I'm just going to point out some particularly good and bad ones, which might not be clear. Do not ever take this relic. It will kill you. I think most of these are fairly known. Make sure to play around Stellar Brew Arcana Archive as well. This relic gets much better with Keeper level, but is generally very good. Be careful when you take this. Be careful taking this too early in the stage and get a very clotted deck, otherwise it's good. This is either really good for certain comps or really bad. Ties discounts the modified cost by 2. So defends and strikes you copy will still be 0 costs with Ties if you have Haritu. Just point that out. Trickster Hat does not affect generated cards, which is important for the likes of Hela and Uvhash. What else should I cover, really? Just covering things that are very important. This wheel's one of the best. This is one of the best relics, despite not being a gold one. This is also very good. Honestly, do not take this ever unless you really know what you're doing. And just be careful with this, not to infinite devour everything. Infinite devour means you devour as many embryos as possible and trigger that effect by the number of times. It's a fun one. So, I should have a resource on the screen, if possible, if my video editor didn't get out at this point. But essentially, every single team comp, almost every team comp in the game is, unless you have a full offense team comp, almost every single team comp in the game, say with this team comp, which is not complete, but just pretend it is, has 4 slots, and it's the same slots. You have 1 main damage dealer, for example, Uvhash, Hello Katana, Salvador, etc. 1 Aliemus and consistency support. You know, characters like Ties, like G-Doll, Scamelin can technically count. Of course, there's characters with overlap. Like Hola can both be an Aliemus support and an offensive support. But yeah, your Aliemus and consistency support, your offensive support. So the offensive support is going to multiply your main damage dealer's damage in some way and provide secondary damage. So for example, with with G-Doll, who again can work in this role, she gives you the whole team base damage 10% temporarily. Tink gives you massive crit rate and crit damage. Hola gives you a final damage multiplier and crit rate and crit damage. Tulu is basically a damage dealer that functions in offensive support, although they're not really for Caro, but they're just an example of the principle. These characters multiply your team, and you need these big multipliers to push that damage through, because base damage and strength will not take you alone. With the base damage, the strength, the crit damage, and then the final mults from the likes of Clementine's amazing in this role as well. With that, that'll push you to the next level. And then you have a survivability support. Again, you usually see some overlap, but your survivability supports are basically Aegis for the Petrify, Celeste for Revive, Faint for Death Reses. She's the de facto best in this class. You can also run, technically, Corpusant if you have her leveled up. Salvador is actually a good survivability support, mostly because they, as well as, I usually recommend them as a main damage, but their Sanctuary of Mercy gives you a temporary barrier. So with your teams, you just want to think, does this team comp work according to that formula? Of course, as you become more adept, you'll, of course, learn and get more comfortable, and you can run most team comps can work as long as they follow a formula and a kind of skeleton and a win condition. That's the thing. You need to have a win condition. It's like, how am I going to survive? How am I going? Well, no, the first question you should ask is, how am I going to put out enough damage to kill what I need to in a reasonable period of time? For mob encounters, that should be really turn 1 or 2. After that, it gets really risky, usually. And then you're asking, and how do I survive for the times that I can't Exodia obliterate them in a turn or 2? As long as those questions are answered, which sounds a bit banal when I put it like that. But as long as those questions are answered, you're good to go. There are some team comps like Poison, of course, which tend to have the damage dealer burden spread out across the entire team. But for conventional team comps, which most Caro team comps, despite having clashing playstyles, are functionally conventional. Whether they deal damage with mostly with their command cards or their exalt, or with something else entirely, like Katagura, stacking up a gigantic hyper flare. Either way, you just want the Aliyama support, survivability support, and offensive support. The only times this should not be true is, again, if you're running one of those unusual comps like Ichor Poison, or if you are running no survivability support because you are confident you can just obliterate everything, which is viable for quite a few stages. Just make sure not to bring it into something that's going to get into a drawn out fight, and hope you don't brick too hard on turn 1. I have a kind of more of a full list of classifications, but you can also ask around. And honestly, as you play the game, and I'm sure you listening to this, you know, you're quite experienced to kind of just figure out the basic categories of characters. There's only a few characters in the game that I would say are misleading. For example, Clementine is a good example. This character is amazingly good, but in the early game, she does gigantic damage just with her life form reconstruction, which a lot of people think, oh, she's the damage dealer, you know, with her exalt and with her 5-hit attack. But her damage is still useful late game, but only for mob encounters. It doesn't scale very well compared to other sources. Like, even with, you know, massive endgame setup, her exalt will hit like 70,000 damage, which is a lot. But in the context of HP bloated endgame bosses, not a lot. So as long as you're wary of stuff like that, which generally you can immediately tell just by looking at their stuff like their strength multipliers, stuff like their base damage multipliers, and enlightens, how their enlightens are structured. And once that is done, and you can identify the characters, you can build a team according to your preferences. There's lots of tier list content out. Some, admittedly, most of them I don't really agree with, but this game is very complicated in that regard. And apart from a few characters I mentioned with Scorn, like Alva and sorry, not Nymphire anymore, Alva and Pandia, and Cassia, really, these are the only characters that are stinkers or very situational. Otherwise, you can and should employ characters as you see fit. I'm just looking at my sheet and thinking, oh, 13:13, what an inauspicious time to end. I'm just thinking, is there anything important I missed off? The Dtide building follow the same formula. Just bear in mind, okay, Dtide, when you get to it, is according to Arc 2 rules, which is partly outside the purview of this video, but all you need to know on a very basic level for Arc 2 rules, which certain events are as well, is do not use these rare wheels in Arc 2. They're extremely strong in Arc 1, extremely bad in Arc 2. So just use whatever SRs and SSRs you have that are appropriate. And make sure to bring a good amount of key flare on the team. Flat key flare, most of all, is your friend, especially early game. That's why this is so good. 200 key flare at turn end. This wheel, 200 key flare after releasing Annihilation. Incalculable factor, 200 key flare after releasing Exalt. These kind of flat key flare event effects early on will give you what you need. And just be careful bringing very, very rouse dependent teams into Dtide early game. When I say very, very rouse dependent, I mean most teams should only have 2 premier rouses. Most. There's exceptions. And again, poison like rouses everyone. But generally speaking, you want to go, who's the 2 characters I'm rousing and who can I afford to go without with? That's about all you really need to know for Dtide adaptation. Again, once you get to doing 350s and trying to do 350s, congratulations, you're definitely not a new player anymore. So, you know, I won't go into all the details, just enough to you know, just check the matchups, check the relics, of course. Every week, every 2 weeks you get one of these. For a specific faction, I mean. And yeah, you can finish it out with that. I think that is all I really needed to know. So I will gratefully leave you with blessings and hope you enjoyed this rather rambling video, and most of all that you enjoy playing the game and your day. All right, take care.